Okay, we are here with the Decode podcast. This is Daniel Stanphill with Aurora Boardworks. You guys want to introduce yourselves for the listening audience?
Sure, you got Elias Malfavon here with Metal Etch Services.
And then Sean Kincaid with K&F Electronics.
Okay, thank you. We are on our second episode. We are still kind of undecided at this point how we're going to play the first episode, whether we're going to just release clips, release the whole thing, kind of keep it as a pay-per-view for the really hardcore fans out there. We'll see how it goes. If we do, I'm sure we'll at least release some background stuff that we included last time, stories of how the three of us got started together on LinkedIn, chatting it up. That's actually probably a good place to start this week's episode, is how we were communicating on different things just this week. Sean had a pretty cool project dealing with some smaller components I have to place on a daily basis, and it's kind of cool because this project ended up kind of involving all of us and some outside influence from other helpful sources that we all talked to also. So maybe, Sean, if you want to give some background on what you were doing this week.
Yeah, so I had a customer come to me. It was R&D board, so I didn't feel too bad if things didn't go right, and he was okay with it, and their customer was okay with it to really push the limits on this. And so it's kind of weird. It's an LED with a 0201 body, but 01005 footprint. And so, I called Elias on this, and hey man, these are the Gerbers, and I need a stencil for this. And, it was interesting to hear that, like, he recommended to go to a 3mm on this and reduce the, is it called apertures, right? Is that what you call them? What do you call your...
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we call it. It's a fancy name for hole in metal.
Yeah, because that's that's what I call actually like what you program on the speed print, right? The printer. So, but to an untrained eye like mine, right? Like, it looked undersized, right? Like, from what the footprint is compared to every other, 1206, 805 that I see that I run, was totally different. And
well, that component you're working with is super interesting because you mentioned it's got an 0201 body, but you said 01005 footprint. And by that, I've seen that picture of the component. So it's got the physical outline on the component of an 0201, but instead of having its regular leads on the end of the package, it's a bottom terminated component. And so leads are actually underneath the component, spaced apart the distance that an 0105 normally would be. So you've got your footprint on the board, your layout, your pads, your landing pads on the board are actually 0105 sized, and then you're placing an 0201 component on top of it. So it's probably like super common for some people, and it's like not a novel concept at all, but I hadn't seen it before, and I thought it was pretty cool.
yeah, and then even what was wild to find out that possibly even a 2.5 could get you a better release. Is what do you call it, gasketing, right, Elias?
Well, I think mostly what we're talking about is area ratio, right? So when we were talking with our consultant offline, he knows who he is. He'll get on here one day. We were looking at what the area ratio of the aperture size and the foil thickness, what it yielded, and we were getting into some pretty challenging territory, right? We were dropping below 0.6 area ratio. So if it needed to be, we could have dropped the foil thickness to kind of tilt that area ratio in our favor, but you were able to print at those levels with the configuration the way it was.
Were there any other components on that same stencil?
Sure. And that was part of the consideration of not just, well, let's just go to 2mm, right? That's the easy way out. And now we don't have to worry about any print challenges. But as Daniel alluded to, there were some other components there that may not play so well with such a thin stencil foil. And that's oftentimes the challenge. You have to pay attention to the smallest package that's on the stencil for sure. You can't forget about everything else that's there. And that's where we get into some of these step stencils with multiple thicknesses within one stencil. And
I was going to bring that up. If this was not for R&D and it was for volume production runs, you probably would have been recommending a step. Am I correct in assuming that?
yeah, if this does go into any kind of volume, then that's something we'll definitely look into, and I'll try to convince Sean
I mean,
with the investment.
I don't know if maybe I'm talking out of turn. Maybe if he's getting good results, then you know if it's not broke, you don't fix it. But I just don't know if it's from your perspective, if you see a difference in maybe repeatability and consistency, if you were to try to tilt it in your face, you know, if you've only got the two mils on all the placements, does it just almost guarantee better results or
Yeah, and it comes down to, do you have to build 7 boards or do you have to build 700? What's good enough for a small proto run doesn't necessarily translate into, any kind of large production volumes. And I'm sure somebody out there is going to say 700 is not a large, but for guys that are doing high mix, low volume, 700 is a decent run.
it is?
There you go.
So
Yep. I love 700. I wish all of our runs were 700 boards, honestly.
absolutely, absolutely. And there's a lot of folks that are in that same circumstance. It's teens or a couple dozen. It's not hundreds or thousands.
I did a lot of interrupting, so let's give you another chance here to tell us, pretend like I don't know how it went the first time, and give us a rundown of your first pass. I'm assuming 100% yield, glory results. You probably had all of your employees around you, fireworks maybe. Am I setting the scene?
Kind of. You're missing the lion. There was a live
That's
lion.
right. That's
and
right.
the eagle was flying around. Just glory. Just so glory. And it was, in its talons, it had the American flag and it was flying up. It was beautiful. But
I saw that on your last video.
thank you.
Yeah.
So our consultant friend told me to up my speed print profile, right? So typically I paste at 50. I think it's I don't know. It says like
Millimeters a second.
yeah, MS, right? That's what it says, M/S or something. And
Mm.
I tried to look at the data sheet one time on it, and it was like a range of like 5 to 5,000. It was so.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
I don't understand how they can give you that wide of a range. Surely they know better, like what speed it works at
Right, and even
than
like
0 to 1,000.
That
I'm
narrows
sure-
it down pretty well.
Yeah.
right, and like foil thickness, right? They should be able to narrow it. Like, hey, at this foil, use this speed,
Yeah.
use this speed, use speed, and or maybe
Yeah,
even
who else
10.
should be the expert besides the manufacturer of the product, right? They should know
Right.
better than anyone else.
100%. I mean, just put your paste down and test it. But anyways,
Mm-hmm.
consultant told me to put it at 100, and also he gave me really great advice. So the way Elias did it was he half etched the fiducials into the board, and I put this special type of paper on top of the board itself, and I left the fiducials uncovered. And I kneaded the paste 6 times back and forth before my first pass even happened. And this gave me a beautiful, what's he called? The
Sausage.
sausage. There
Our,
you go.
our shadow consultant calls it a sausage. I've always heard it called a bead, personally,
yeah.
but
It's cross the pond translation. And
Yeah.
I had my great sausage. I did exactly like the doctor ordered. I took out the stencil, cleaned the underside, and then went to go do my real print. And it was actually really cool to see the solder mask on that piece of paper, like that transfer film. It was like a tattoo almost. It was cool, because usually it's on the board, you don't get to see it or whatever, and it was like I could dangle it. But and also, to make matters worse on this board, it was over 200 of these LEDs, right? It was a 12-inch board, and it was on O12 material, super thin. And so I had to build a carrier, I had to pin it, and I had to make sure that the
What's a standard? Is it 063 or is it
O
or
six
062 and 093? Are those the two?
I would say 062. 093 would probably be the next standard, and then 125, and then you have your 47s, 31s, and
So when
14s.
you say you had to fixture it, that's because the board is too thin to stand up to the normal printing process with the board supports that your screen printer has as default.
I wouldn't worry so much about that. More is about the warping.
Conveyor, right?
Yeah, yeah, the conveyor, and then you got warping, the
It'll
special placement. Forget about it, dude. It's a wrap.
Yeah, it would just fold in on itself and fall off the conveyors, wouldn't it?
Right. I mean, we're talking probably what, a couple sheets of paper thick. Like that's
Yeah, literally.
yeah. So I got the tape out, and luckily we have the machining here at my shop where we can make, unclad carriers, and we just drill pinning holes. And when you have the board made, you kind of just say, hey, this is where I want my pinning holes, and you tape it up with Kapton, and then take out your pinning holes, and then that board's seated. And you did a good job if you get a repeatable new board and you get the same alignment pretty much every single time. And so I did all that, and I upped the speed to 100. And my first pace, man, I didn't have to go back in. I mean, I showed Elias the pictures, and put some up on the screen here, and I was happy with it. It's what I learned about the first thing about 5 solder balls across.
Yeah.
I don't know, Elias, this was the first time I ever heard it. So I don't know if you could kind of explain.
The 5-ball rule. Yeah, go ahead, Elias.
Sure. So the minimum width of an aperture for a square or a rectangle should be wide enough to accommodate 5 individual solder spheres, right? And there's a sub rule to it if you're using a round aperture, but for sake of squares and rectangles, because that's what we're most commonly using
For this crowd.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
So there's two variables at play. It's either go with a bigger aperture to accommodate the paste you're using, or go with a finer paste to accommodate the aperture width that you need to use. So in Sean's case, he was using type 4 paste. So we had to take that into consideration, make sure that the width of the aperture could accommodate 5 type 4 solder spheres.
You would normally, with that kind of component, you would normally see type 5, wouldn't you?
Well, not necessarily. Like to IPC 75.
If you've got the right aperture dimensions, then type 4 is going to work just fine.
Yeah, if you look at the chart that's included in IPC 7525, kind of gives a range of foil thickness and a recommended paste type per component. And for an 0105, type 4 is there. Now, if you can, type 5 is going to work better.
So what I did was, I have a SPI, but I also have Elias, right, who's seen 1,000 pasted pads under a microscope. So as I ran, and to set the scene, Daniel, it was actually just me by myself in the shop at 6 p.m. worried about my wife because she's got the baby at home, and I know she's going to grill into me like no tomorrow for staying late, but I got to get this printed today. So, that's what I did. I took it under the scope. I sent it to Elias, and he gave me the thumbs up, and then came another issue that I never expected was the pick and place part of it, right? So this LED was so delicate that the normal height of 0.15 of this actual package was actually crushing it because of the pressure force of the actual pick and place going down. And so I had to trick that into go to a 0.18 height. And, I was kind of concerned about it, but then I talked to the consultant, right, and all these other people, and say like this is a common issue. And I even called the customer, because the customer actually used to run an assembly shop, and he said he had to do that all the time before too. Certain components.
Does it have any type of a soft cover? Is it like a gel on top or one of those type of LEDs, or is it a hard case?
It's kind of hard. Here's the thing: when it cracks, there's actually like a white line that goes exactly through the actual LED, and you can see it. And if it's there, then you know it cracked. So turning that down fixed that problem. And then, I was kind of shocked. There was no vias on this hole to actually even do like a real solder profile test to it, truly see. And so I ran my regular profile, and this was a leaded paste too, so it's a lot more forgiving. And the regular profile, plug it in under the USB, and they lit up. I was blown away, just absolutely blown away, And then I had a bunch of other prints like that. Then I was having an issue later on the next day. Not gonna mention names, but somebody said I should push my package up and try to print even faster because it's a better result. And
this time he'll be extra grateful to stay in the shadows.
Yeah, and I don't know. You never. It just. I loaded the job the other day prior. And then I'm training another operator on this, and he loaded it up, and I'm sure the humidity was different during the day, and I even tried to switch the squeegee blades, right? Like, so maybe yesterday I had them one way, and today I'm going to put them this way, right? And maybe I did that wrong, so I took that out. I was getting nowhere near the same results as I was getting last time with the faster speed. So I slowed it back down, started pasting just fine, and then I ran into the billboard problem, and it's so weird. It's like I didn't even build this job, right? Like I call the customer, he tells me about the height setting, right?
Tell people that don't know what a billboard problem is on a pick and place.
The billboard, I'll show a picture of it too. It's where
there you go.
The component's actually on its side, and where I believe the root cause is. I'm still getting it looked into. Is actually when it's indexing inside the actual feeder tape. So when it indexes forward to the next one, it's bouncing around in the pocket. And I took a slowed down video, one pickup at a time, to watch it actually go inside, and how it was picking up at a little. I mean, when you're in this small of a range of a footprint, right?
Going that fast,
you might as well be a mile away, trying to pick that thing up. And the crazy part was the placement was perfect. I couldn't ask.
Yeah, that billboarded component would be nice and centered.
It was just like, I was like, this thing's place is so good, and then I'm like so mad at this. And then I was thinking like, the component came on a reel, right? So I'm like, maybe if I unreel this, maybe the tension from the reel or something is causing this to not index correctly, And I ended up figuring out how to, take the billboarded part off. I can solder the board. Put some flux on it, right? And once I have those pads on there, maybe just add a tiny bit. And it's hard to add paste to a 01005 footprint. I mean,
no doubt.
I got a pretty good hand, and I was steady, so I kind of went in and I did it. And I'll show you a picture of one where I put way too much.
With a syringe, or how did you apply it?
Dude, I take tweezers and I dip it inside the paste jar, and I very carefully put it down there. And I'll show the picture up of the one where I put too much paste, that big sphere. Did I send that one to you guys?
Send it to me.
That thing is giant. Thankfully, it came off and didn't short, and it was and that was a part that it wasn't lighting up, right? And so thankfully these were in series of 4, 5s, and 6s, right? So you could clearly see when one was out. Well, with a covering over the light kind of to diffuse, because these things were bright, man.
They were really bright.
Yeah. Very bright, for sure.
The camera never does it justice, too. It's so bright.
Now, the billboard wasn't the only challenge you had from a placement standpoint, am I right? You had some other challenges in terms of, I think they were getting placed completely upside down?
I had 2 upside down. Yeah.
And that's going to be, so both of those are going to be the same issue. I mean, when it indexed in the tape, whether it flipped it up on its side or flipped it all the way over, that's happening when the tape is advancing to the next position. And how you know that is these tools, these nozzles that pick up the components use vacuum pressure, right? So it's literally impossible for it to pick it up, change the orientation that it has it, and pick it up again, so have it on one plane and then flip it over and grab it on another. Because when it loses vacuum as it's spinning, that part's gone. Like a little, it's flying somewhere else in your machine if it were to lose vacuum while the turret is spinning at the speeds it turns at. It picks it up one time and lets go one time, and hopefully that time when it's letting go is as it's placing it on the board. But it's going to be impossible for a component to get flipped over all the way over or placed on its edge or flipped onto its edge after it's already been grabbed by the nozzle. So it has to happen before the pickup has even occurred.
Yeah, and to give a point of reference of how fast this is actually picking up, I had to Google this because I was trying to slow down the index rate, right? And the slowdown rate of the feed rate would be 40 milliseconds, right? That's the slow. The standard is the 5 milliseconds, right? To put that in perspective, 1,000 milliseconds equals 1 second, right? So 5, like 0.005, right? Like that's how.
Yeah.
And that's like 12 times in a row. Pop, 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 pop. It's so fast, and it's amazing to me how quick, and it's even crazy.
So at a regular pace, it would load up the full turret with 12 components in 60 milliseconds. So you're still talking way less than a second. Way less.
Way less, yeah. And then placing it too, right? It just flies over on that axis and then pop, 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 pop. The same almost speed. And so I slowed this one down though because I cared. I just cared, right? It wasn't about, I don't ever want to be the guy that's like, I got to put this many components down because I got to ship this much or I'm going to, I just don't want to be that guy. I'd rather build something that, my dad always says it, right? Like you can excuse a late delivery, you can't excuse bad quality. There's
sure.
I'm sure he's had to say it a million times. It's
mostly to you.
Yeah. No. So yeah, I mean
the listening audience will learn that Rick Kincaid is a regular source of some real gems of a quote. I mean, he gives some great Rodney Dangerfield style one-liners.
Yeah, he's a trip, man. He just knows everybody. Like Jesse from DIS came by today to the shop, and he was just in the area, and like
what's DIS do?
They make, all right, so I know them from their automatic pinning machine, and I am so jealous that this thing exists compared to what like I had back in my day, right? Like, so we had it was basically like a fixture, right? And so on each end is two pins that you put into it's just a manual pin, and it actually punctures a hole through the actual panel of the board, right? And that right there pins, so when you say if you're drilling and it's 062 and there's nothing really small on it, and you can stack 3 up at a time, 3 panels at a time when you go ahead and route, right? Or I'm sorry, drill. And so you pin these together so that way they stay together, and then those pins actually go inside your drill to help align it, right? So it's part of it. But everything was manual when I did it, and it was pneumatic, right? And you had to put it in, and you don't want to be off a little bit, kind of like DigiKey's ruler is, right? Just off a little bit. So I had to. I can't stand it. It's just because that's the thing too. If you're going off, right? That thing was going up like this, and that thing is that board that you showed on that thing, right? Is probably what, 1.5 inches, 2 inches tall maximum. Could you imagine the drift you're going to have on an 18 by 24 inch panel all the way up? It is going to be so far off registered you wouldn't even believe.
What board did I show that had, what are you talking about?
I'm going to, in post, I'm going to put that thing up on the screen, that DigiKey red ruler. Well,
I put up a ruler, but I mean, it's, a ruler is 12 inches long
No, no, no.
and like an inch wide. I didn't have a board with it.
There was hole sizes on the left, right? And they went all the way
Mm-hmm.
down to 0.4 millimeters, which isn't even that small. And as they went from the larger, which I believe started at maybe 1.6, and then you could see the actual hole registration drift.
It was drifting. Yeah.
Yeah. It
Go
would
ahead.
still be an IPC spec, right, for that 2 inches, right? But a panel, when you build it, is you have 17 inches by 23 inches of working space.
I used to work in construction and helped install some floors. And if you didn't start out perfectly square, not so bad at the start. You get to the other side of the room and turn around and you're like, oh no, this did not go how I thought it was going to.
Yeah,
So yeah, I follow you.
and that's exactly too. And like, this is the first step, right, in the PCB manufacturing process. Those pinning holes, right, determine also like where your exposing units line up to it, right? Because those pins are going to go in it. It's going to be where your resist is developed to, right, where your solder mask.
Okay, so as an assembler, when I get a board that doesn't seem to perfectly match, like I do my program, I take my Gerbers, I load up my factory logic software that you say I cape for. I load up the bill of materials and the Gerber, and I get my program all squared away. I send it over to my machine, and then I start to do my NPI with my board for the first time, load it up, and the fiducials it finds perfectly, but then every placement is just barely offset the same way. Is that an example of when the starting points got started wrong and there's just a slight shift to the whole thing? Or how does that type of mistake happen?
That to me sounds like whoever your board manufacturer was exposing with the old film method. And the reason why I say that is because what would account for something like that would be the shrink, or the expansion of the actual film when it's exposing. So if the place that you're manufacturing in is too cold, too hot, too high of humidity, right? That
Sure.
expands film, and that's just what's going to happen, right? Or contracts it, depending on which way it goes. And so, when it may be off-registered in one area or another, and if it's drifting especially, right, that could be the case too. And also, you got to remember when you're manufacturing in a panel like that, maybe their bottom left was registered correctly, right? Like, so you may have some panels that are working good, but you might have other panels that were working bad, right? Boards or arrays or however you're working with it. And, it may have been good. It's kind of like the G93 in routing, right? Like it's your 0, and as you go out, the less calibrated the machine is, the more it's going to drift, right? Either way, just like DigiKeys is. So,
Have you seen those CNC shirts that say there's no place like G93 and it shows all the zeros or whatever because that's the home position for the machines?
Oh, I like that. That's a good one.
It's a cool shirt.
I gotta get that.
Good nerd.
Some drilling guys I know, man. That's a good one for sure. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and so maybe their lower left was right, but then as they drifted on, maybe it totally changed where it actually where it go. But if it's just a fiducial, that's not getting drilled. That's just pure exposing, right? So that kind of makes me think they're using film, and either it's expanded or stretched. And when that thing's exposing, it's kind of hot in there, right? Like you have to run a chiller inside of an exposing unit, right? Like you have to run it attached. And so that light bulb in there is super hot. So unless they're using like an LDI, that might be the case. I don't know. That's the thing with board manufacturing. There could be 1,000 reasons for that. And
Okay.
it's real hard to narrow down what section. That's like, when we were running boards, every single stage inside the circuit board manufacturing, like you run it over to quality and they do a check, then they sign off on that, right? So and there was at least 16 stages just to manufacture a double-sided board that production stops. They have to approve it just to make sure that stuff like that drift isn't happening. Because after your first piece is good, then you can run through the rest, and it's a pretty repeatable process. But, if just one stage is off, then you might sometimes scrap that panel and restart because it's just that far off. But,
Okay, well, I know we had a couple other segments we still wanted to get to, but we need to be able to neatly wrap this one up with a bow and a ribbon. So I imagine you said you were getting some billboards. If I recall right, you talked to some young phenom. There was some outside influence or help you found
From
that
Nebraska.
brought that. Yeah. Anyway, you managed to get some placements working,
Dude, it was unbelievable.
and
Call
lights were shining bright, and
call
roses and rainbows and robins were singing.
call it what it was. I checked that box and there wasn't a single more billboard after that. You know, that box that guy, right, told me to check, and it was unbelievable. It was a night and day. Spit more parts, but we had extras. You know, thankfully we had extras, and you know, customers happy. That's all that really matters at the end of the day. And I learned and I growed from it, right? Like I know now in the future, we were gonna make some quality changes, you know, and that's the beauty
Some
of it
paste
too.
handling changes,
Yeah,
hopefully.
yeah. And when I yeah, because I got eaten alive. It was used the same paste the next day, left it out, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's too much or too long." And like, I've used paste 6 months old before, no problem. But I
What was
don't
my
do.
response to that?
I forget
Elias has heard it all.
what was it.
I said, you haven't done it with.
Yes, that's the truth right there. And so now we're enacting, you know, 0201 fresh jar paste no matter what, right? And you know, a consultant, I liked his stretching procedure. That sounded kind of actually pretty nice. It's kind of smart too, right? And
Yeah.
50-50 mix, and you know,
No, that's great. See, we were making references to things that all of us are familiar with, each other, but the listening people aren't in on all these conversations. So the idea of stretching that paste out, we already do some of that here, as far as we never put used paste back into brand new jar. We have an intermediary container so that you're not contaminating your brand new supply. Because basically, the way I've understood it is the pot life is like the shelf life or pot life or whatever of the paste. It's the basically like once it gets used up, if you put that shorter pot life in with the brand new, it instantly takes on the shorter pot life, even though it was brand new. It's now got the same wear in it, and the mixture of alloy and flux and whatever. I don't the air and humidity or whatever has been introduced that causes it to start to go. I don't start to expire. It goes faster that way. So if you can separate it and only pull brand new paste out, never put any back into that jar, you can keep using the used paste. It's not like, I mean, some people don't. Some people use it for the day and that's it. They throw away. They try to time it up to scrap as little as possible and also not end up having too little at the end of the day, where now you're introducing defects and, you know, insufficient solder in places. So they play that game to try to scrap as little as possible but keep good boards or whatever. But we preserve our paste as long as it's within a good working window. Put it in a second jar. I love our Shadows idea of how to make it stretch longer, because if you apply a little bit of the used to your stencil and then half of the amount you want to be working with, and then you apply some new to it so that you're still getting good mixture of fresh paste to use, but you're also using up the stuff that you had the day before, so you don't have to deal with quite so much waste or a lack of quality.
yeah, I loved it.
I think on a future recording or future episode, we need to be sure to get a pace expert on. I think that would be a fascinating conversation to have, to discuss, you
Yeah.
know, these type of nuances and others regarding paste.
We'll either have to stop referencing him or he's going to have to come on, you know, because unfortunately, he influences. I say unfortunately only from the sense of he's not joining us immediately, but you know, we all we all have really enjoyed our discussions with not just him, other people too,
Yeah.
but credit where credit is due if they want it. Okay, so we've got a planned segment that I kind of want to get into. We all spend a unhealthy amount of time on LinkedIn, so we see a fair amount of quality content, probably just as much bad content too. But the stuff that all of us like to share with each other, and either something that might have been particularly impactful, you really learned something you hadn't before, it struck a nerve with you, or this week mine is going to be something that made me laugh for sure. So it's going to be a good way to bring in other people that we know and don't know, but hopefully grow the reach and audience a little bit, get more people to participate, and just a little camaraderie amongst LinkedIn connections. So
Ready?
Elias, did you want to go first with your clip, Best of the Week?
Yeah, absolutely. So I picked a post from Chris Merrill with Europlacer, and full disclosure, I don't know him from Adam. I'm connected with him because of you guys, and you're big fanboys of
He's a great guy.
Europlacer.
I'm willing to vouch for him.
But I thought it was
Sean
really
says terrible things about him, but I'll say nice things.
Not getting a dime for this video.
yeah, that's the first time I heard his name was Sean's love story of a video. But I thought it was really a cool deal. Chris has done a series of posts regarding a ride that he's doing, a bike ride that he's doing in order to fundraise, to support cancer research and so on and so forth. And it's been neat to watch this series and the support that the community on LinkedIn has provided in terms of comments, well wishes, financial donations. And seeing this last post this week was kind of a culmination of that, showing that he was able to hit his personal goal of $6,000, which contributed to an $18,000 total team goal. So I thought that was really neat, and I know that he listed.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I believe his boss at Europlacer is one of the purposes for him riding, and seeing that exchange publicly was kind of inspirational. There's so many posts that are technical. There's so many posts that are political. There's so many posts that have a lot of discord to them. But this was kind of a unifying type post, and it was refreshing.
That's a great pick, man.
Yeah.
That's a great pick. I mean, I really personally like him, not just as a customer of his, as a person. I know Sean's going to say the same. I think it's extremely commendable and inspirational to take a personal cause like that, make it public, be vulnerable, share what really means. It's really easy to keep it professional on a professional platform and not ever venture outside of that. It feels safer. But he's talking about people that are really near and dear to his heart and what it means to him, why he's doing it. And it's a lot easier to just say it than do any of it. Who actually gets up off their butt on their free time to, raise money, do charitable things like that, do good things for others. It's just a lot more people say it than do it, and to see him commit to it. He started out with an injury too. I think he was trying to recover from a pretty significant injury, and to do that kind of training late in the game to get ready for it. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's not like he's using an electric bike or anything like that. He's not cheat coding.
Yeah, that's old school.
Yeah.
I thought I heard a rumor that you were in an electric bike gang.
I am.
Maybe we could get a picture of your...
My father-in-law drove it to his house a year and a half ago, and my children have prevented
So you
me.
drive those even. You don't even ride them. You drive them.
Dude, it's got cruise control, right? Like I can go up to, I think, 20 or 25 miles per hour on cruise control. And so you're just...
When I was a kid, I rode a single-speed 21-inch BMX bike across the wide city of Lincoln, Nebraska. I can't even imagine cruise control. That's
But you don't have any hills or mountains there, bud.
we've got
I'm
hills,
not giving you
mountains.
any sympathy.
Definitely no, definitely no hills. You've heard the crunching of the gravel on hills as I'm talking to you guys when I'm walking.
Real quick for the listening only audience, Sean now has a picture on the screen of him on his e-bike with a Sons of Anarchy style motorcycle cut on.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
repping my city and my people, man. It's 19 mile. I'm in the 19 mile crew, and at the bottom of the patch it says Concrete Jungle. You know, really it all started because my one buddy is super into motorcycles, and I kept calling my e-bike my hog. I'm gonna get the hog out, change the spark plugs, change the oil.
Perfect.
And he was so offended by it, and I just loved how upset he got by it. I decided to have a vest made and put 19 mile Concrete Jungle on it, and he just shake his head.
Perfect.
Yeah, but he buys into it now. It's my hog, so he likes it. But yeah, it's sheltered. It's chained up in his garage, so I know nobody's gonna steal it. And she's just sitting there waiting for me to ride. Yeah.
He's a beauty.
Okay, well, great nomination, Elias.
Thank
We
you.
are going to let the people vote and decide what the best of the best was, and we will give away a wonderful award of nothing to the winner, and at least give them a flowery post
Yeah.
celebrating their accomplishment of impressing the listening audience of these three fools. Okay, Sean, you have a post. Do you have a nomination for your best of LinkedIn?
So my nomination is a play on the Olympic Games, right? And it's this post about the average Joe in the Olympic Games. But when you fast forward here at the very end, there is it looks like a bunch of dads, and what they're doing is they're racing two garbage cans down one of those tracks with the circles, right? That like Usain Bolt would roll on. And then, I mean, the way this guy's belly bounces, priceless down that track. It is so funny to me. That to me, I don't know. I like comedy a lot, so that's my winner of the week.
Okay, I hadn't actually seen that yet, so maybe the listening audience can get my live reaction as I'm watching some of this. I think it's pretty good. That's a good nomination.
Did you see
All
the
right,
trash
so-
cans at the end too?
Yeah.
Those beer
Let me,
bellies just bouncing
that belly.
ferociously.
Sure.
Everyone will enjoy this one, so great. That's good stuff. That's going to be hard to top, but mine is a perspective that I think we all share. If you're a content creator, you slave away on your post. You think, what are the people wanting from me? How do I deliver? How do I not? I got selfish and stopped posting for a few weeks. Sean was like,
Boo.
crawling into a hole and crying about it, so you got to give the people what they want. And I know when you guys work really hard on a post, you think it's perfect. You feel like people are going to stop you as you are walking down the street to congratulate you on your brilliance and excellence, and you get like 74 impressions, and you're like, okay, all right, that didn't exactly go how I thought it was going to go. But the way it goes in all of our heads is my nomination of the week. I'm guessing his name is Tomas Budin, but hopefully I didn't butcher that too badly. He captions his video by saying how people expect you to react to their LinkedIn announcements. And it's a pretty exaggerated reaction. People, he goes slow motion with it, gets the dramatic tears going and the slow clap, all the different things that I think are, quite frankly, appropriate for the level of genius that we share sometimes. So I think that's my nomination for some of the best I saw this week, and we will let the people decide what they liked best. And I think maybe we could also start opening that up to suggestions. Maybe we can either steal their ideas as our own or also include a fourth nomination that came from the crowd. But we'll see. we'll see what people think of this one and what they thought of the nominations, and we'll go from there. So one other idea we had before we go, because this is probably going a little longer than my attention span, is listener submitted questions. So we definitely want to get the LinkedIn community active in this podcast and have a lot of participation, hopefully. So any questions that you have for all three of us, any of us, please feel free to reach out to any of us and ask, and then we'll be able to include them in the podcast. So Elias, I know we have 2 for this episode. Do you think it'd be that you have them pulled up and we listen to them and get everyone's opinion?
Yeah. First up, we have a question from Kyle Keedell with Horizon Sales, and we're going to go ahead and roll that here.
Hey guys, Kyle here. So we've all been in the industry for a while now. Personally, I'm going on 15 years, which is crazy to think about. So my question is, if you guys could go back in time and give your younger selves a piece of advice, what is that?
Oh, that was a good question. That's a tough first question.
That is a heck of a start.
Sean, you want to lead us off?
Study as much as you can, man, and network as much as you can. I spent a lot of years behind the desk doing cold calls, and I didn't ever care about the paperwork of the actual standards of everything and testing and time studies and I look at our friend from Canada, Caleb, and how much paperwork he goes into it and how dialed in he gets his program, and if I go back in time, take it more serious and not just a job, right? I would take it more serious and try to learn and network as much as I can, because jobs like my job couldn't have been done today if I didn't have the network that I had, helping me out along the way. So that's what I would tell myself.
Great answer.
I was talking, and I would buy Bitcoin for pennies.
That's brilliant. That's what the people want right there. That's the advice we need.
No, but seriously, I think if I could go back and tell my younger self something, it would be...
Okay, good answer, Sean. I guess my younger self was working in construction, so I would have offered myself encouragement and solace, telling myself, it won't always be like this, okay? Have hope. Have hope. You'll find your true calling. Just try your hardest every day, and opportunity will fall your way eventually.
I would work less. I spent my entire 20s working like 60 hours a week. I would have been young for longer, honestly.
Last question. Listener submitted question. This is from our friend in the... where's he at? Is he the Czech Republic?
Czech, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, we had a second question from, and I apologize, I'm trying to work on your name, bud, Petr Dvorak.
That's good. That's way better than Sean would do, so that's why we have you reading these questions.
I like just saying Peter, but go ahead.
And we were happy.
I say Peter also for sure.
I don't know who we're talking about.
Coming from somebody who has a name that's not that easy to say, I try to be sensitive to it.
I type it correctly every time.
There you go.
But we were all three happy to see this question come in because this is from one of our LinkedIn favorites. So let's hear what question we have here.
Hey guys, just curious, who do you think is the funniest among you? And by the way, how many kids do you all have together?
Hey guys. Who's the funniest? Anyone want to proclaim themselves as the funniest?
I will, 100%. Yeah, for sure.
Sean thinks he's the funniest?
Because I don't even have to, naturally, right? I don't know.
No, that's good. That's a good point, because Sean's funny whether you're laughing at him or with him.
There you
so
go.
It works great either way, right?
Yeah. Yep. We're talking shapes, words, spellings,
Well, I think that's the thing. All three of us sort of have our own unique brand of humor. Daniel's humor's, you can't blink or you'll miss it because it's usually pretty witty, and a lot of times it's above what's comprehensible by most people. Sean's got his own brand of humor for sure.
I like dirty.
It's what?
I like dirty humor. Close to borderline.
Cut that out.
Cut that.
We're gonna put a beep. I'm gonna put a beep over, but I was thinking about that earlier today.
Borderline.
Oh my god! I mean, I thought dirty was a little bit like, okay, we really want to go there. And then he just
I didn't say beep.
Borderline. Borderline was the kindest thing you said there. That was good. That was good. You'll have to include some footage of us laughing about that without being able to include what we were laughing about.
So the second part of the question was, how many kids do we all have? So I have 3. I have twin 10-year-old daughters and a 9-year-old son. What about you,
Sean?
Kincaid?
I got a 22-month-old and a 3-week-old. So I got 2, boy and girl.
You know they're young when you're still counting in months and weeks.
All right, and I've got 2. They're a couple of feral girls out in the country. I'm gonna try to domesticate them at some point, but they're good for now. So that's a wrap on listener submitted questions, and I guess this podcast. I think it was a good second podcast, probably the first full length podcast that'll get released. Hopefully they get better as we go. I'm sure we'll get more comfortable, and any help we get from the audience for more. If you guys have segment ideas, things you want to hear us talk about, topics, feel free to share. We decided funnel all communication through Sean. Just his inbox needs it. So
Yeah, and if it's in your head, please share. Like, don't be scared to type it, and just send it anyways.
Yeah, we want as much participation as possible. This show's really about engaging the larger community, and we're kind of boring without all your input. So please, by all means, let us know what you're thinking. Let us know what you're curious about, and it'll be on here.
Yep, and if you have any guest ideas, also suggestions for people that you'd like to see on here, at some point we will be featuring some guests and getting their input and backgrounds and stories. So people that you'd like to hear from, feel free to share those ideas as well. But it's been fun. It's been good this week. Hopefully we will see you again next week on the Decode Podcast. Thank you.